file compression, zip, 7Z. Let's do this. When I take pictures, I like to keep almost all of my raw files. Generally, I delete the bad one, but I keep the good ones. I also keep the so-so in case I change my mind in the future. But raw files are large. So on my camera, it's about 40 megabytes per picture. And when I come back from a trip, I generally have between 1 and 5 gigabytes of pictures I want to keep. Over time, this adds up, so to save space, I compress all these files before uploading them to the cloud. And recently, I was looking at Nextcloud and realized that some of the files were compressed using zip and some other were compressed using other methods. So I decided to test for the best compression method so I can stick with it in the future. To test that, I made a script that compressed a folder using 7Z, gzip, tar.xz, and zip. For 7Z, I decided to test two algorithms. The first is LZMA and the second is LZMA2. What I've seen online is that the second version, LZMA2, is faster, so we will see. Also, I tested two compression levels. I tested 5, which is the default, but I've also tested 9, which is the maximum. If you want to try the script for yourself, I will put links in the description to download it from my GitHub. The first test I did was with 1 gigabyte of JPEG files. I know JPEG are already compressed, but I was wondering if we could squeeze them more. To ensure consistent result, I ran the test inside a virtual machine with 4 CPU and 16 gigs of RAM. I ran the script and then looked at the log file to get the compression ratio for each method I selected. As you can see, there was almost no compression, so compressing JPEG files is not worth it. Now, I was wondering if the same applies to my Sony camera. I use a format called compressed raw files, so I was wondering if we could compress them or if they will behave like the JPEG. So I ran the same script on a folder that contains 1 gigabyte of compressed raw files from my Sony camera. I extracted the data and put it in this table. And as you can see, I was getting about 11% of compression. LZMA and LZMA2 gave me about the same compression, but LZMA2 was twice as fast. Thus, there isn't much reason for using LZMA over LZMA2. Another thing to note is that the gzip and zip had about half the compression of 7Z, even if the compression time was the same. I think zip is still the default on Windows and Mac, so if you are using one of those operating systems, you might consider installing 7zip to compress your file using another algorithm. Or you could switch to Linux. Another thing I realized is that tar.xz is as good as 7z, but much slower. This compression method is the default on my main computer, so I need to change that. Now, I was wondering if I could get the same compression levels if I try it on a bigger folder. So I tried the script on a 5 gigabyte folder that contains Sony compressed raw pictures. And as you can see, the compression was about the same as the 1 gigabyte folder. Thus, the number of files I want to compress doesn't affect my compression ratio. But the last tests were done on compressed raw pictures, so I was wondering if I could get the same results with uncompressed raw pictures. I ran the script on another folder that contained 1 gigabyte of uncompressed raw images. The compression ratio was bigger as we got roughly 28% smaller files. So if you are using uncompressed raw pictures, you can save a lot of space by compressing them. Next, I tried the script on 5 gigabyte of raw pictures. I was expecting roughly 28% of compression, but I got about 23%. This means that in some cases, it might be worth compressing smaller folder. For instance, if I come back from a trip and I have 5 gigabyte of pictures, I might want to separate them into 1 gigabyte folder. So to conclude, I think in the future, I will start to use 7Z with the LZMA2 algorithm. So based on my test, it was the fastest with the best compression ratio. Also, I won't bother changing the compression level as I will only get 1 or 2%, but the compression time will be twice as long. Also, I will try to avoid zip as much as possible as the compression ratio is not good at all. So I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, just give me a like and see you next time.